It's been a wild week at the White House. A resignation from the National Security Advisor and a new nominee turning it down. A growing confrontation with U.S. intelligence agencies and a planned review of their work. A no-holds-barred attack on the press in the form of a 77-minute press conference, and an apparent shift from decades of American policy on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. On that, a whole lot of reactions and concern right here in the Middle East. Here with me to weigh in on that is Dr. Bassem Khoury. He served as president of the Palestinian Federation of Industries and as Minister of National Economy. Dr. Khoury, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the conversation, let's take a look at the moment that American policy seems to have shifted from that press conference on the two-state solution.
I thought for a while the two-state looked like it may be the easier of the two. But honestly, if Bibi and if the Palestinians, if Israel and the Palestinians are happy, I'm happy with the one they like the best.
So, Dr. Khoury, when we're looking at the two-state versus the one-state solution, first of all, what was your reaction to that shift? Do you think a one-state solution is something that the Palestinian Authority and the public would be willing to entertain?
You know, in a way, it's very funny because, I don't say maybe not only funny, but it is really not a nice thing that in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, the only forces in our region that were against a two-state solution were Hamas, Israeli wrong-wing extremist parties, and Hezbollah, and of course Iran. So it was shocking to me that somebody like the President of the US would be, in a way, pushing in a direction that is in line with these, in my book, extremist forces. To be very honest, what this statement makes is a moment of truth for everybody. Palestinians, before coming here, I Googled statistics in the Israeli Bureau of Statistics. As of the 31st of December 2016, in Israel lived 8.46 million people holding Israeli IDs. Of those, 6.04 million, 72% approximately, are Jews. The rest are non-Jews. If we're going to be in a one state, so you add to this number around 4 million, 4.2 million, then the Jews in Israel will be below 45% in this one state. So the moment the truth is there, this whole notion of a Jewish state is, in my book, something of a farce, and this whole notion of a one state and a Jewish state is a bigger farce.
Not realistic.
Of course, because basically you have a problem now claiming to be a Jewish state if you're only 72% of the population. What about the other 28%, which is a sizable group? And when you drop to 45% and you wanted a Jewish state, this is, I think, will be the end, in my book, of this whole dream of an Israel that many people in the West and many people in Israel aspired for. And to be honest, many Palestinians are not very happy. They're not unhappy. You know, many Palestinians are saying, okay, if that's the way it's going, if I were a Palestinian official, I will today start negotiations from the one state.
So that's interesting you say that, because a survey that just came out yesterday.
Not because I want a one state.
Because it might be most realistic.
I would start negotiations from a one state.
So
then the majority of Israelis would think twice and say a one state is not a good option. Let's give them a two-state solution.
And we saw in that survey just yesterday, a joint survey coming out of Ramallah and Tel Aviv, that actually around 80% don't even believe a solution is going to come in the next 5 years. Let's listen to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In that same press conference, he made reference to some other regional partners that he says might play a big role in the peace process.
We have to look for new ways, new ideas on how to reinstate them and how to move peace forward. And I believe that the great opportunity for peace comes from a regional approach, from involving our newfound Arab partners.
So if we listen to Netanyahu over time, he has been more of sort of a favor of the bilateral approach. We've seen the Palestinian Authority often going to more international forums like the Paris Peace Conference, like the ICC, like the UN. Would the Palestinian Authority, and should they entertain having Arab countries actually play the main role in a negotiation?
You know, it's funny to hear Netanyahu say this. Netanyahu was the one who said no to the Arab Peace Initiative, where all Arab states said, yes, we are ready to make peace with Israel tomorrow, provided there is a two-state solution, provided there is a full withdrawal of Israel from the occupied Palestinian territory. So all of a sudden he found his lost friends in the Arab world. It is good. At least maybe he is now seeing the light in a more better way.
He seems to suggest that alliances have shifted radically. What he said before that was that Arab countries are getting closer and closer to Israel, whether behind the scenes or publicly, and that might change their role in peace.
Well, let's put it this way. What he is basically banking on is the big major rift in the region, which is the Shiite-Sunni rift. And basically he feels that the Sunni Arab countries, mainly the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, will be siding with anybody who's anti-Iran under the notion an enemy of my enemy is my friend. However, he has forgotten that to all these Arabs, they're first and foremost, they're Sunni what? They're Sunni Muslims. So the whole issue of Jerusalem, the whole issue of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the whole issue of Palestine per se is not something that they can just hide behind and give up on just because they have a bigger issue with what they believe as a bigger issue with the Shiites. Now, I don't think when push comes to shove, even those Arab countries that are so full, regimes that are so full of hate to the Iranians, will go along with Netanyahu the way he wants it. I think even with them, he has to give something on the negotiations, and he has to, if he really wants an open relationship with these countries, and I underline the word open, he has to give something to the Palestinians, like the Arab Peace Initiative.
Compromise will be part of it. So let's point to one other sort of statement we've heard often from the Israeli government. We heard it echoed by President Trump in that press conference about incitement coming from the Palestinian side, from the top down in some cases. Let's hear what President Trump had to say in that press conference.
I think the Palestinians have to get rid of some of that hate that they're taught from a very young age. They're taught tremendous hate. I've seen what they're taught. And you can talk about flexibility there too, but it starts at a very young age, and it starts in the schoolroom.
What's your reaction when you hear President Trump saying that?
Well, let's put it this way. As a person who believes in coexistence, one of my biggest challenges in my life was to ensure that my children don't hate. Because basically, Trump thinks that hatred is only in books. Hatred is born every time you cross a checkpoint. Hatred is done every time there's an Israeli colonist that occupies your land, that shoots at you, that goes and burns your olive tree, etc., etc. Hatred is two sides. Of course, if we really are to have peace, we have to ensure that there's no incitement and that this hatred, this cycle of hatred, is stopped. Today, crossing to the checkpoint, to come here, I had to cross the checkpoint because I live outside the new wall that was built by Israel. You know, the lady, the soldier, she was basically decided to take selfies with making a long queue of people wait, take selfies with her friend and making us wait till she finishes her selfie. It's a small story, but it tells you the sort of daily humiliation that we have to face every time just for living in this part of the world. So yes, we have to do something about hatred, but it is on both sides. The provocations, the actions by Israel, by their colonists who are occupying illegally Palestinian territory, is all incitement, is all actions of terrorism, and we have to stop it. And on both sides. And I'm not an apologist. I'm not saying it's us and not them. But what we're saying, we have to be fair on both sides. And let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
If there is
like Trump likes to do.
Yes. And to be honest, you know, in that statement, he singled out Palestinians. But in a way, he said on both sides.
Unfortunately, Dr. Bassem Khoury, we have to wrap it here. But an important message to leave and to send to the White House. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more. Don't go anywhere.